Emergency personnel of Reddit. What's the dumbest situation you've been dispatched to? Got called to a motel where our patient explained that he needed to go to the ER to get an HIV test. He wanted to finally put to rest the rumor that he had AIDS. He was very drunk and insisted that it was indeed an emergency and he didn't care that his insurance wouldn't cover the ride. His, also drunk, wife came along and it pretty much turned into Jerry Springer in the back of the ambulance. Arrived on scene to a guy who was too lazy to get out of his living room chair, so his skin had literally weaved itself into the fabric. His wife emptied a crap bucket that sat under a hole they cut in the bottom of the chair. She fed him all his meals and waited on him hand and foot. He didn't have any other problems other than he didn't feel like moving. We had to cut him out of the chair. It was on an episode of some Fat Life type of show. His skin had literally weaved itself into the fabric. What? I'm from Australia and once I saw in the local news that his guy heard noises in his kitchen and believed it was an intruder. What actually happened was a giant mud crab had crawled up from the river and was rummaging through his cabinets. They interviewed the policeman who went over and they were literally joking and making fun of the guy on the news. To be fair, a mud crab can take out a level 3 PC in a few hits. Not emergency personnel, but someone called 911 on us because their prescription wasn't ready, and it wasn't even for a drug that was immediately life-threatening. Plot twist, prescription for chill pills. Should have seen it coming. Wife and I are both paramedics, she in a larger city, me in suburbia. She gets a call for an injured person, arrives on the scene to find a black gentleman approach her complaining of head pain. She asks how it happened and the patient replies, the bee hit me with a smoothie. Her, I'm sorry, hit you with what? PT, a smoothie. The bee hit me with a smoothie. Her, how did a milkshake hurt your head? PT, not a milkshake, a smoothie. You know, a smoothie, the thing you smooth your clothes with. A smoothie. Yep, he got hit in the head with a clothes iron because he pee off his girlfriend. I recently went on a pregnant woman who said she had been walking all day and now her ankles were swollen and she couldn't walk anymore. Boyfriend saw my reaction and said he'd just drive her. Yep, their plan was for him to follow the ambulance in the car while she went to the ER for swollen ankles. Another was a 3-year-old stuck a big pen up his nose and the end plug came out. Parents for the life of them couldn't get it out and called 911. I put my hand out and told the kid to blow his nose on a count of 3. I closed his other nostril on 3 and he blew out the end cap. Sign here please. Got paged out for a kayaker who had fallen out of his kayak in northern Lake Michigan. Dispatcher said a passerby had seen him struggling to get back to his kayak. No exact location but a general area given. 3 volunteer fire departments respond. We start covering 2 miles of beach with about 20 people. The bugs are terrible and we are having no luck. County rescue boat is en route from about 20 miles away and we have one of our members launch his personal boat and he is coming from the other direction about 10 miles away. Boats get on scene and search continues. We now have about 40 people looking and 2 boats. Dispatched has now notified the Coast Guard out of Traverse City and they are on their way with the helicopter. I was icy and requested dispatcher to contact original caller for more info. Well, they thought it was more important to drive home than to stay and wait for help. So we have all of these people and resources looking for someone that we have very little info about. Finally, a state police officer says he has found a rock that kind of looks like a kayak. He gets the original caller on the phone and explains what he is looking at. The caller says that sounds like what I seen. I guess I was wrong and hangs up. 3 hours and thousands of dollars in resources. Complete balls. I am a firefighter EMT in a mid-sized city and work in a rough neighborhood. People would be amazed at the number of ridiculous calls we go on. There are too many stories to count, and it's common for people to call at 3 AM saying they are dying, but find out that their leg has been hurting for 3 weeks and they suddenly couldn't take it anymore so they need it checked out. The dumbest I can think of, however, is a person called because they were concerned of an odor of gas. If they had just looked out their front window they would have realized that directly across the street were ponds of human waste sludge from a wastewater treatment plant. The person had lived there for years. Some of my best calls muffin cinnamon rolls were from the elderly. Little old ladies that lived alone were notorious for calling me to light their pilot lights, shovel their steps, even pick up a pint of cream for their recipe. Small town cop firefighter EMT. I would always do whatever they needed because I knew I would have a plate of brownies or a basket of muffins at my doorstep. I even got a scarf once, but holy crap, I still dream about those brownies. A pregnant woman who was caught attempting to steal chips from a convenience store claimed that she was going into labor once the police arrested her. Yeah, no, abdominal incarceritis. Not me, but my husband, who was my boyfriend at the time, had to respond to call for the fire department. The lady had burned bacon and it was smoky in her kitchen. I laughed pretty hard hearing it on his radio. My family is probably someone's dumb emergency call story. In the past we've made calls for the following. 1. Got cut trying to tear saran wrap. 2. Thought an intruder was on the roof of the house, turns out it was just the sound of snow melting. 3. Cat stuck under the treadmill. 4. Reported my dad's car stolen. Turns out his friend took it to pick him up at the airport. 5. Stuck in a tree while trying to rescue a cat. Twice. Once the cat turned out to actually be a possum. My entire family will never forget the time my nan tripped and broke her hip. We called an ambulance. However, my nan refused to go with them because she hadn't put her makeup on yet. So we sat around chatting to the EMTs in the kitchen while my nan sat at the table putting her face on with a broken hip for a good 20 minutes. To be fair, your nan, when I broke my ankle leg, it took about 30 minutes before the pain really kicked in. Once it kicked in, holy crap, I was in shock. Coast Guard flight mechanic. We got a call that there were multiple flares being shot off about 10 miles offshore. We fired up the helo, got on scene and searched with no results. Turns out the person who called it in was a guy getting wasted in his waterfront home looking out the window. Those flares? It was the reflection of his cigarette in the window every time he took a drag. 19-year-old male smoked marijuana, ate lasagna and is now feeling unwell. It was a code 3 call. Emergency but not urgent, no lights and sirens. This was in York Region, Ontario. I've had some funny language barrier issues. We got a call once for a hanging. The dispatcher came back to add on there were 2 males hanging from a telephone pole. We got there and checked the area and advised the dispatcher to call back the complainant. She came back and apologized that there was a misinterpretation. It was 2 suspicious males hanging around the telephone pole. In a similar vein, we got called for another hanging. A 12-year-old male hanging from his bunk bed. We got on scene and the family said he was actually hanging from a fishhook on the wall. I was like, oh crap, this is going to be nasty. Further investigation revealed the fishhook had just snagged his pants while he was climbing down from the top bunk. No injury at all. I nearly became the idiot who calls 911 for something stupid when I worked at a hotel overnight. I glanced at the camera feed to see what was going on around the property and I saw a dead body at the bottom of the pool. I grabbed the phone and started running toward the pool. I was going to call 911 on the way, but the stupid office phone was again not working. Then I opened the door to the pool and realized that someone had left a huge beach towel in the water and it had sunk to the bottom. Dispatched for an unconscious person at a bus station. Show up on scene. Turns out it's just a homeless dude sleeping. Ask him if he want to go to the hospital. Explain that they won't really do anything but it will give him a place to stay for a few hours and he'll get some food. Guy says yes. We start talking a history. Any chronic medical conditions? Nope. Do take any medications? Nope. Any medication allergies that you know of? Yep, I'm allergic to psych meds. How exactly do you know you're allergic to psych meds? Some fuckwit doc decided I'm bipolar and schizophrenic, but that ain't frickin' true. Looks like you maybe should be in the hospital. Not me, but a friend of mine is a cop and he told me the story about an older lady who had called 911 for a UFO, so my buddy and another cop show up and after a few questions they realize the UFO in question was in fact just the full moon. Dispatched to a call of a suspicious package at Starbucks. They said the backpack had been sitting there all day. EOD opens the backpack and it's filled with corn cobs. I was called to a convalescent home at 3 AM. I had been sleeping in my ambulance for chest pain. I arrived to check vitals and take assessment. She was gassy. To be fair, gas can be extremely painful sometimes. Add anxiety to that and panic ensues. We had a call to a farm where the farmer was trapped following a structural collapse. 3 engines and a user crew head on out to the address where we are directed to a distinctly not collapsed chicken shed. The farmer is inside, lying face down under the casing of a ceiling fan which had fallen off the roof and bopped him on the head. He was lying perfectly still and being used as a vantage point by a number of chickens and was convinced he was paralyzed from the neck down as everything felt cold and numb. After giving him a quick check over, we asked how long he'd been there. He guessed it had been about 2 hours before the farmhand had found him. 2 hours on bare concrete, at night, in October. Okay, fair enough. So a bunch of us get ready to move the casing, only for one guy to brace sooner than the rest and accidentally lift it himself. It was thin aluminium rather than steel and weighed basically nothing. He could have removed it himself at any time. Somebody with better self-control than I explained to him that he wasn't trapped and, no, he wasn't paralyzed. He was just cold. We had an ambulance with us and they checked him over for hypothermia, but the worst he had were many peck marks from the chickens who had seized their opportunity for feathery vengeance. Got called to a smoke report in our district. Person's description: it smells like wood. We arrived to her home, in the forest, and she said it smells particularly like pine today. No mention of smoke. We confirmed it did in fact smell like pine when we arrived. Case closed. Run came in as an outside fire. Turns out it was a flaming bag of doki on a doorstep. I wasn't even mad but happy that tradition lives on. I once called 911 because I thought my neighbor was beating his wife. They pulled into their driveway, went into the house, and then I heard high-pitched screaming and a man yelling "shut up" over and over. My friends and I woke my mom up after I called 911 because we were so freaked out. Turns out, our neighbors have birds who like to scream when people come home. Responded to a call 488 UF complaining of weakness at a bus stop. It's 9 AM and our first call of the day. Walk up to find a little old lady slouched over on a bus bench moaning. After we help her up into the ambulance, she asks for us to not ruin her medicine. Well, medicine is H and she's weak cause she was able to get a hold of some good stuff. Now I'm the kinda guy that wouldn't mind narking an overdose 2mg IV just before rolling in through the air, but I just couldn't do it to granny, so we gave her nebulized naloxone and lo and behold, it barely touched it. We had to give her a full dose IV and she still was zonked a little bit. Whatever she was using was some good stuff and I doubt she ordered it from Reader's Digest. Went to a call where a woman had locked herself out of her car with her child inside. We arrived and tried the door handle and sure enough it's locked. She shows us the keys and how the battery is dead and won't unlock the car. So we take the keys inserted into the lock and take her kids out. She had apparently no idea that the key had any function other than the ignition. Coast Guard here. My first unit was a larger ship that's not normally sent to do the hero work that you see on the Weather Channel. Mostly we did counter-narcotics patrols off Central America, but we were home ported in the Pacific Northwest, near some notoriously gnarly waters, which were usually the purview of the small boats and helos. The only time we spent more than a day in them was after a fairly intensive maintenance period so we could ensure that all the work that was done would hold up at sea. These shakedowns were usually 2 or 3 days somewhere just off the coast of our home port. We were on our way back in from one such shakedown, which had already gone a little awry after a helicopter broke down after landing on our flight deck. In the middle of the night we were sent over 180 miles from our position, and inbound course, to search for a recreational boater who had left a harbor in Washington and not been seen in 5 days. His wife reported him missing to the local Coast Guard sector, which sent us on the case as the nearest asset. They also dispatched a helicopter crew, a smaller patrol cutter, and a small boat to do search patterns for this guy. Keep in mind that, given where we were at, the currents could have carried him south of San Francisco in 4 or 5 days. But we searched our little 100 square mile box anyways. For 2 days there were 2 Coast Guard cutters, a helicopter with a flight crew bouncing in and out from shore, and various small craft looking for this guy. That's around 120 dispatched Coast Guard personnel, not to mention local authorities and civilians out on the water who had heard the radio broadcast about him. The search was called off after the guy was found in Mexico, having never even gotten in his boat. It was still moored up where he left it. He just told his wife he was going out and then got on a plane to Mexico, apparently planning to stay there. We were 2 days late getting back to port, with a 10-week patrol looming just a week after that. I hope he got fined so bad that he crapped for his bees. I'm in the Coast Guard and we respond to dispatch water rescue calls. We had one last summer where we responded to a call of a person in the water off a cliff by the beach. From the call it sounded like a surfer, so we launched a boat. Sector launched a hello, and I went with another guy in our F450 as a shore party. We beat everyone there and immediately started scanning the water. To get a better view we drove onto the beach. By that time the boat and helo was on scene doing search patterns. They searched for a good 30-45 minutes before the helo stopped and hovered over something in the water. The reporting source was at the top of the cliff and was asked to confirm if that was the person they saw in the water. She said that it was. The helo asked again if she was positive that's what she saw. Once again she was absolutely sure it was. It was a crab pot boy. I forgot to mention the best part. While we were driving on the beach in our F450 that has US Coast Guard plastered all over it, following a fire department SUV, someone decided to call 911 on us for illegally driving on the beach. Had a resident call and let my office know he contacted 911 because he swallowed some toothpaste while brushing and didn't wanna die. Same place a year before a kid threatened to swallow a whole bread without chewing so he would die. It was a suicide threat so we had to contact 911. I got called once to a regular for general medical in the middle of the night. I get there and she meets us outside at the ambulance. I ask her what's wrong. She says I'm dry down there. I say puzzled. Down where? She replies. Down there? Again puzzled, half asleep. Down where? She says I was freaking tonight and normally I'm wet down there when I'm freaking, but tonight I was dry. Something is very wrong. She is extremely adamant something is wrong, so I just tell her to get in the truck cause I don't feel like wasting any more time. Get to the hospital and the doctor looks at me over his glasses and says in skeptical tone, "What's wrong tonight?" I say she's dry down there with a smirk. He was puzzled as I initially was and says, "Down where?" I said down there and pointed down with my finger. He sits there for a few seconds pondering this and replies to me, "Well, you know how to fix that." I lost my crap. Not mine, but a co-worker told me his story. He was dispatched to a schizophrenic woman who said that a bee had flown up her fanny and was eating her from the inside. She was very self-aware and accepting of her illness, but claimed that it wasn't the issue. The medics didn't know what to do, so they auscultated to listen for buzzing sounds. Dispatched to assist police for a reported assault. Arrived to find a dumbass 20-something-year-old tried to start a fight with a 40-something-year-old guy cause he was standing near his GF after they had a fight. 20-something-year-old shoved the older guy and he knocked the kid's front teeth out. So the kid gets in his car and waits to try and run the older guy over when he leaves the bar. Misses the guy, somehow gets stuck on the curb and the older guy pulls him out, puts him on the ground and calls the police. That's when we arrived and took Guy Smiley to the hospital. 4 hours later we get called for the emotionally disturbed person. Guy Smiley escaped the ED and tried to drown himself. Got scared and decided to sit on the side of the highway cutting himself with glass. Took him back to the hospital. 2 hours later Smiley's GF calls 911 cause she is feeling suicidal after the whole ordeal. It was an awesome 4th of July. Some of you, I have no idea as I could not see at the time, responded to my airway obstruction recently and transported me. I felt like a celebrity when I walked out of the ER completely fine after, and the nurses at the front desk were so happy to see the airway obstruction all better and walking out the door. You guys are heroes. My daughter had to call for me and I was transported without shoes. They couldn't clear me at home, so we ran lights and sirens to the ER and I had to hold my head and neck in a certain position to get air and could not see anyone. Thank you for saving my life. I answered a 911 call that a lady placed because the light bulb in her closet was burned out. When I told her that wasn't an emergency, she asked if I could fax over a request her apartment office to have them change it. I'm an emergency physician, so I've never been called to anything, but I keep a list of all the stupid crap that people have called an ambulance for. My favorites are 1. Toothache, I must have been in a good mood because even though this idiot woman called an ambulance for a toothache, I offered her a dental block. When she realized this meant I would be putting a needle into her mouth, she refused, then left without anything even being done. 2. Pimple. A woman in her early 30s squeezed a particularly stubborn pimple on her top lip, then called an ambulance because it was numb and tingling. She was convinced she had done serious damage. When I told her she would be fine, she demanded a cab charge, prepaid taxi voucher, to get home. 3. Rehab. Chronic alcoholic called the ambulance because he wanted to get into rehab. We don't have inpatient rehab at our hospital. He was supposed to attend appointment for rehab at another hospital earlier that day but was too busy getting drunk to attend. When told we don't have drug and alcohol services after hours either, he demanded transfer to a hospital that does. Demanded to see my supervisor. Told him it would be a long wait. That is not going to happen. Saw him getting loaded into a police car on my way home from work. A federal building. For some reason to dial out they dial 9 then 1. If they happen to hit 1 again as is custom prior to an area code, then have dial 911 and it goes to dispatch. Pretty common in fed buildings actually. 10-year 911 medic here. I don't know where to begin because there are so many. One response always sticks in my mind. It was about 4 AM and the call came in as a person having trouble breathing in bed. When we got to the basement apartment we found a 40-year-old male sitting upright in bed. The guy was upset and proceeded to describe a bad dream he just had. He said he felt like someone was chasing him and he couldn't get away and how scary it was. He said he woke up startled and breathing heavily and sweating. We checked his VS and he was fine. I said it sounds like you had a pretty bad nightmare, and he agreed. His wife was rubbing his chest in sympathy. He did not want to go to the hospital and signed our refusal. I have a student job working in a downtown core where there are 4 homeless shelters surrounding the top tourist area in the city. Part of the job is being a first responder as well as making sure the homeless population do not harass the public. After 2 years of working here you start to build relationships with the homeless people, and so one day I came across a man I knew quite well. We'll call him Malcolm. So Malcolm had always been a pain in the butt and liked to harass and intimidate tourists. He did not like me at the time because I had been the last one to call the cops on him. Since I starting work there he has slowly been losing mobility and at this point was using a walker. I knew he had a pretty severe painkiller addiction and was also a heavy drinker, so when I found him passed out on a bench one day I decided to check on him. I asked him if he was okay. No answer. I nudged and asked him to wake up. No answer. I give him a little shake and said a little louder, Malcolm. At this point he opens his eyes and just stared at me. I asked him if he was alright. He said no and closed his eyes. I said, do you need medical attention? He opened his eyes, paused and lightly said yes. I think I took too much. So I called 911. While waiting, I was having a hard time keeping him coherent and awake and he was fading in and out of consciousness and I'm worrying more and more about him. The wee-woo comes flying around the corner, slams on its brakes and the paramedic hops out to see what the problem is, and all of a sudden, Malcolm sits up, stretches, looks at the paramedic and says I told him not to call. I was just napping, and then hobbles away on his walker. I had no idea what to say to the 3 officers and 2 paramedics. They thought I was so ridiculous. Still a great story though, and you have to hand it to Malcolm for being that clever. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.